Breaking news now. President Trump threatens to impose more tariffs against all of China's remaining exports to the United States if talks with President Xi fail in November. These new tariffs could amount to $257 billion of Chinese goods. President Trump and Xi are set to meet at the end of November at the G20 summit in Argentina. The President Xi also calling on his military advisors to prepare for fighting a war. Xi making those comments following his visit last week to the disputed islands in the South China Sea. Joining us now to take on these issues and to tell us where this tariff dispute and his judgment trade dispute between the United States and China are headed. We are delighted to be joined by Dr. Michael Pillsbury, author of the New York Times #1 bestseller, The 100-Year Marathon Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. Dr. Pillsbury, good to have you with us. And let me start with first the continued escalation of rhetoric as President Xi today making those threats to his military commanders, the United States Navy talking about further actions to keep freedom of navigation operations going in the South China Sea. Where's that headed?
Well, I think both sides, both Beijing and President Trump, are playing to the same audience. It's the 10 nations who belong to something called ASEAN for short, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. These are kind of swing votes. They're not quite sure who will be the future power in the world, us or them. So President Xi says things every now and then to kind of show his toughness. At the same time, the United States runs these patrols through disputed Chinese territory. I think that's what we're seeing more and more of, this kind of shadow boxing going on. I don't think war is going to break out in the near future, but there is an audience both sides are playing to. Well, I tell you first, Lou.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and any heads up would be appreciated by this audience, which I will promise to alert
no war.
Straight away.
We're not even having a Cold War, by the way, with China. That's been an exaggeration coming out of Beijing. That we're seeking a Cold War. That's not true either.
Well, that's a great piece of propaganda for the Chinese because it suggests to the world that they're at some sort of parity with the U.S. military. They're far from it, right?
Right.
And the Russians, however, are not a fiction when it comes to a Cold War. Putin seems to be making every move possible to provoke and then want to discuss things over with this president. I cannot read Putin to save me. I know that you certainly could, so help us out.
Well, I do want to point out something President Trump authorized his National Security Advisor, John Bolton, to do, which is to propose talks with Putin about the China threat, to kind of send a message to the Chinese that we and the Russians can be talking about your economic threat, your technology theft. A lot of things that China does to the United States, they also do to Russia. And we need to make sure they don't align themselves together, number one. But number two, we need to try to increase Russian suspicion of China. I think Putin is a suspicious kind of guy because of his career in the KGB. So I think John Bolton's proposal is going to work, frankly.
Well, let's hope so. And if the reality is that the trade dispute with China, the president has chosen a strategy that really leverages a declining economy in China and leaves China very vulnerable. This is how does this end, and how soon does it end, in your judgment?
Well, I'll teach you some Chinese, Lou. They often talk about President Trump in a very flattering way. They're scared of him. The Chinese phrase I've heard most recently is 我们中国的领导低估了特朗普总统的决心. We've underestimated President Trump's determination.
I didn't catch all of that, but I got the underestimation.
I think the Chinese were misled. They got a lot of old friends in Washington and New York. They thought these people would turn President Trump around. That was wrong. Then they thought in the last few weeks that they could kind of find out what the bottom line was and make a low ball offer. That hasn't worked either. So the Chinese now are deeply puzzled and not quite sure what to do next, and they've got the clock is ticking.
Here, you know, if the Chinese are half as smart as they pretend to be, well, if they were half as good at international relations as they were at stealing our intellectual property, they would have comprehended the steadfastness of our leadership much sooner.
Lou, I think you know they were counting on Henry Kissinger to stop this.
We got to run, Dr. Pillsbury. Good to see you. Come back soon.